Next, let's take a look at the different properties for the range selector itself. Let's start by selecting composition number 3, Smooth Selectors. Now, using range selectors with all of the different parameters associated with those may be confusing and even frustrating at times, but if we step through and take a look at all of the different characteristics that range selectors can take on, you'll soon discover all of the different ways that you can use them to your advantage. First, let's start out by modifying one of the properties for our text phrase. I'll open up the properties for this layer, and we'll simply animate the scale. This gives me a range selector, and we know that we can change the size here, and it affects the size of the entire phrase. We'll undo that. Now we do know that we can modify the range selector from the beginning and the end of the phrase to something smaller by clicking and dragging the values, or changing the start and the end of the range selector in the comp window, but an easier way might be to select the text first. Let's select this animator, then delete it. Before we apply the animator and the resulting range selector, let's select part of the text. So with the text tool selected, click and highlight a portion of your text. Next, come down to Animate, click, and create a scale value. Now if I change the scale under this range selector, I can see that only the portion of text that was highlighted has the range selector applied to it. By clicking here, deselecting the scale, and simply clicking the range selector, I can see where that range selector's start and end exist. If I open up the parameters for range selector, I can see that in addition to my start and the end, I also have the option to offset where the range selector lives. By sliding this in a negative value, I'll slide the entire range selector to the left. By changing the offset value to a positive number, I'll slide the range selector to the right. By doing so, I'll modify the scale for those characters which fall under the range selector. If I move it far enough to the left, I can move it out of the range of the entire phrase. Currently, we're using index to set a range, so our range selector starts at index number 8 and ends at index number 15. In order to move this range selector far enough to the left so that it doesn't cover any characters, all we need to do is move this by a value of -15. Moving it any further to the left will continue to move the range selector, but we won't necessarily see it on screen. Now, this may be important if you need to slow down the animation of your range selector somehow, and simple curves in your graph won't do. You can continue to offset this in the negative value beyond the start of your source text. We'll move the offset value back to 0 so that it lives in the center of a frame. Now, if we change the scale from 156% to something greater, say 200%, you can see that the characters start to overlap one another. In order to give them a little more space, we can add a tracking value to this selector. By adding it to the selector, whenever the scale grows to this value, the tracking value will help to space out those characters. So here, under the Add Parameter menu, we'll select a property, and from the property, we'll select Tracking. Next, under the tracking amount, we can simply click and drag to change the value so that the characters no longer overlap. Above these parameters that we've changed, but beneath the range selector, we'll see that there is an additional set of advanced parameters. If we open up the advanced parameters by clicking and twirling down the arrow, we'll see that not only do we have access to the units of characters that the range selector is going to modify, but we also have the opportunity to change the shape of the edges of our range selector. Currently, our range selector is set to square. That means that the edges of our selection fall off immediately at the edge of the range selector, much like the edge of a square. If I click on the pull-down menu, we can see the different characteristics that we can apply to this range selector. We'll first start out by jumping all the way down to Smooth. By selecting Smooth, we can see that a smooth curve starts from the beginning of the range selector, with the first part of the range selector close to the original parameters. Then, as our new parameters take over, After Effects creates a smooth curve in order to make those changes evident in our range selector. The next one we want to take a look at is Round. Round is similar to Smooth, but it gives a greater range. You can see with a simple click that this is affecting our entire phrase, not just those characters inside the range selection, but everything. The boundary of our range selection is now defined by a very soft, round elliptical shape, which also spills over into the rest of our text. This is also a good time to show that on some of these shapes that we choose, we can also randomize the order. By randomizing the order, we're actually randomizing where the range selector occurs inside of our entire source text. By turning this from off to on, we can see those changes made throughout the entire source text. Our range selector is still in the center, but with this randomized order, we're applying the values of the changes we've made to the entire phrase inside our soft, round, elliptical shape. We'll turn this off for now and take a look at a few more range selector shapes. The last of the symmetrical shapes is triangle. This shape creates a very linear modification starting at the beginning of the range selector, then in a very angular modification, changes all of those values inside of our range selector until it reaches the center. Then from the center to the end, it creates an additional angular change so that we can see inside this triangle shape a very linear move from the start to the center, and then again from the center to the end.